Republican voters and lawmakers seem to love President Donald Trump's new tax plan. They say the current system is complicated and leaves U.S. businesses unable to compete globally. And they believe Donald Trump has the fix.
We are taking the next step to liberate Americans from our broken tax code. This unified framework delivers a new tax code that is simple, that is fair, that is pro-growth and pro-family.
Much of the plan's appeal lies in its brevity and simplicity. If approved, it would reduce the number of tax brackets from 7 to 4. Companies would see their income tax rate drop from 35% to 20%. And they can pay a one-time 10% tax to bring funds kept overseas back to the United States. Trump says his plan will cut costs for U.S. businesses and encourage them to invest more within the country.
Today, our total business tax rate is 60% higher than our average foreign competitor in the developed world. That's not good. We have surrendered our competitive edge to other countries, but we're not surrendering anymore. We're not surrendering anymore.
The bullish response from investors suggests companies will benefit.
We're finally getting a blueprint that both the president and congressional Republicans are unified behind. And so the anticipation for this event has gotten the markets a little bit excited. You're seeing.
But there's plenty of opposition, with the Democrats accusing Trump of taxing the poor to help the rich.
The top rate on the wealthiest comes down, and the bottom rate on working class families goes up. What kind of plan is this?
There are also concerns that the planned tax breaks will balloon the U.S. deficit. The Trump tax plan hinges on getting a large number of companies to bring billions of dollars in foreign holdings back to the United States. If that happens, the president may well deliver on his promise of lower taxes and more jobs. But if the amnesty scheme doesn't attract enough money, the world's most indebted economy could pile on even more debt. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's break down Trump's planned tax reforms in more detail. Our editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, is in Paris, and joining us from New York is economist James Henry. Thank you both for joining us tonight. James, I'd very much like to start with you, if I may. Why does the US economy need a tax overhaul and indeed tax cuts at this stage? The economy's doing pretty well. It's chugging along, nearly 3%. Corporate profits are surging, jobless claims are down. Why now?
Well, the international tax system needs a tax reform, not just the United States. We have this crazy international corporate system where you have the so-called separate entities that can be parked in Ireland or Bermuda or the Cayman Islands, and by their parent companies, they can load those their home companies up with debt, and effectively companies like Apple are already paying less than 5% with this crazy system that we have now. So they parked about $2 trillion offshore, and it's just sitting there. They're borrowing against it. But there is a need for a real international tax reform across countries. This Trump plan, however, I would call the Goldman plan, really. It's written by Gary Cohn, as former president of Goldman Sachs, and it has a lot of benefits to Goldman Sachs. This is not the way to go. This is going to increase tax competition. And I think countries like Turkey should be very concerned about what this is going to do to the international tax system. You're going to have a race to the bottom here if the United States cuts its nominal rate from 35 to 20%.
Right.
Most U.S. nationals are not paying anything like 35%. They're already taking advantage of this system.
Okay. Now, let's talk about corporations, though. Now, Trump says that lowering corporate taxes is going to allow them to compete more effectively overseas. How accurate is that statement?
Well, I think right now they have a kind of faux territorial system. This is going to make it worse. This is going to say, if you transfer income to the Cayman Islands or the Ireland by parking, say, your intellectual property, patents offshore, and paying yourself royalties, none of that is going to be taxed. So it's just going to be a welfare program for tax havens. you know, it's going to obviously have a negative impact on inequality. It's going to balloon the deficit. It's a real voodoo exercise. It's going to blow up the trade deficit as well because the dollar will appreciate. But the most important impact I'm concerned about is on other countries, which are going to be facing a new round of a race to the bottom. And Turkey's one of those.
Interesting. Craig, let me bring you in. A welfare program for tax havens, says James. Trump is also saying that he and his family are not going to benefit from this, but many are disagreeing with that. What do you make of all of this?
I haven't seen Mr. Trump's tax returns. If I could see them,
I don't think many people have, right?
But well, he's not going to release them. But you know, America right now is a cesspool of angry populism and, you know, political nationalism. And I don't know what's really going on here. Whether he's making tax cuts masquerading as tax reform or tax reform masquerading as tax cuts. Right now in the United States, non-financial corporations are sitting on close to $2 trillion that they don't want to spend. And you know, I want to compare that to the alleged trillions of dollars that are, you know, warehoused overseas. Well, if these corporations are not spending this $2 trillion that's already sitting in the United States, what makes anyone think that they're going to spend the money that they're going to come back with, you know, after having paid 10% on this? I don't buy it. I think what people are looking for here is a wage boost, not low taxes. And the point of this, Azar, and this is what astonishes me, we've gone through a housing bubble. We now have a college tuition bubble. We're having an automotive financial bubble. We're in the midst of a credit card debt bubble. We got every kind of bubble, including Captain Bubble's bathroom soap. The United States is in debt for what? $20 trillion. So here's my question.
Okay.
Does anyone care about debt anymore?
Right. Well, but they may care if borrowing costs. They may care if borrowing costs start going up, and if the U.S. Federal Reserve starts pushing up interest rates aggressively, borrowing costs will go up. But here's the thing: the Republicans say that this is essentially going to be budget neutral. That by making these tax reforms, they're going to boost the economy. That in itself is going to pay for these tax cuts on their own. Sounds like it could make sense, right?
That's just voodoo economics.
Not to me. Yeah, I agree with you. It's voodoo economics of the highest order. But you see, I think it goes beyond voodoo economics. I think we're getting into Adam Smith invisible hand territory here. The global economy right now is run on chaos theory. We're talking about blockchain and Bitcoin and all these kind of weird Felder carbs floating around out there, you know, in the ether. And who's making anything here? And when you look at the taxpayer, what they care about is getting an increase in wages. That's what this is about. Everyone wants more money in their pocket.
Right. Okay, let me bring it back to James. Look, we've talked about the competitiveness of America quite a bit. And it's true, America has lagged behind many other economies, especially when I look at countries like Singapore, for example, Hong Kong. These are places that have thrived, mainly, or to a large extent, because they have a very simple, progressive taxation system. What is wrong with trying to reform the American corporate tax code to reflect these other places that run very efficiently?
You put a lot of lawyers out of business.
People, I mean, we're talking about an economy with, you know, that's still a third of world GDP in the United States. We're doing pretty well, actually. The last few years have been a nice recovery. Europe has finally caught up. You know, but I think the case for tax reform here is really on the international level, where there is just too much tax avoidance going on by major multinationals. And we really need to look at a relatively simple reform, which would be to have an agreement on a minimum international corporate tax. And then countries could compete, above that. But this Trump plan is basically going to go off in the direction of making the U.S. Even more of a sort of a, I mean, it's already a kind of corporate tax haven.
Right.
It's going to make it worse.
Okay.
So I think from the standpoint of competitiveness, the United States really does need reform.
Okay.
But this is...
Very quickly, Craig, I see you shaking your head in disagreement there.
Well, I think, Jim, with all due respect, he's right. But he's living in what I call OECD fairy tale land.
All right.
Because these countries are sovereign nations, and they make their money off of low tax rates.
Okay. I'm afraid we are,
that's the reality,
unfortunately, running out of time, gentlemen. We are going to have to leave it there. James, I'm terribly sorry. We will pick up this discussion again further down the road. But thank you both very much indeed. Economist James Henry in New York and Craig Copetas in Paris. Thank you so much.